Boss fights in V Rising can be tricky, from your first boss all the way up to Dracula, whether you're playing casual or whether you're playing brutal. Sometimes there's just one boss you cannot beat. In this video today, I want to go through my tips on how I kind of frame boss fights, or how I go through boss fights in a way that make them a little bit more approachable. I find that every single boss fight is different, of course, when it's innate mechanics, but I also find that the way I approach them is very different. Now, in my typical fashion of upfronting the knowledge of my videos, what I'm pretty much going to say in this entire video is talking about swapping out your weapons, your items, and your spells to best fit the abilities or mechanics of the boss. If it's a melee-centric boss, put a defense or a counter ability on. If it's a boss where you have to really stay at range because they have a lot of really wild AoE effects, then use a range weapon and spells that really lean into that strength, and swap out armor as needed. And also, a big thing is about framing this. Don't fight a boss in the middle of the day, especially if they're patrolling one, and pull any patrolling bosses into secluded areas that best give you a chance to succeed. But that's pretty much the down and dirty of what I'm going to be talking about, and if that's all you wanted to know, please feel free to just simply shut the video down. But jump ahead to any part of the video that interests you the most, though, using the chapters in both the timeline and the description. And as always, guys, if this video ended up helping you, please don't forget to like, comment, or subscribe. Those things do help me out in a huge way. But let's get started here on my guide to making bosses easier in V Rising. My first tip is going to come down to your weapon selection. This is really going to be dealer's choice, and I want a lot of this to feel like you have agency over the game. There's too many videos out there that just tell you play like this and only like this. Fuck that shit. This game is all about playing how you want. So for example, I'm really good with the axes, but I've also found that I really enjoy the bow, or I really enjoy the pistols, and I'm trying to warm up to the greatsword because I know the greatsword's pretty good. And I also really like using the slashers. Does that mean I use them all the time? No, and I think that this is really kind of how you should be approaching the bosses. You have a kind of set of tools to your disposal, right? Do you need the mobility and the speed of these slashers, right? Do I need this kind of dart in and out capability? Or do I need the range? Do I need to be able to stay back here and shoot the arrows at will? Use these things at your disposal. Don't think you have to approach every boss fight the exact same way. And this is going to be a theme that's going to repeat throughout the entire video, so get used to me saying this. But maybe, you know, you really like taking apart a boss by getting up close and personal, and the frenzy from the axes, while also affording you a bit of mobility. And I want you to also think of your weapons as not strictly tools of doing damage. There are also ways that you can increase the mobility of your character. So again, for example, hey, I need to get out of a really bad situation. Well, rather than my dash is on recycle, well, face away from what you need to get away from and use frenzy. That's a little mini dash in and of itself. Or maybe you're using the pistols. That's a mini dash in and of itself. You can go ahead and use, even the greatsword has the capability to give you some mobility. So rather than strictly thinking of your weapons as a way to do damage to the boss, think of them as also a different tool for allowing you to maneuver away from the boss. Even if you want to use the hammers, right? Well, there you go. That is a mini movement capability that you are not locked into doing damage with. You can use it, throw away the damage, and just get away from something that's going to hit you really hard. You're better off moving away from something that's going to capsize you versus taking it in the face and getting, what, one extra swing of doing a minimal amount of damage. So use your weapons in a way that sees fit to kind of lean into the way you like to play the game, but also what the strengths and weaknesses of the boss are. And that brings me to my next tip. The same spells can work for the same bosses over and over again, but you're kind of working over yourself at this point. And I need you to take a look at your spell book and really crack into things that you like to use, but also are different ways of playing. For example, I was only using Blood Rage and Corrupted Skull for pretty much the first half of the game, but then I started to encounter bosses that were hitting harder, that had a lot of mobility, had a lot of ads on them, whatever it was, and I needed to change up how I approached the game. And this is where you kind of take a look at the way the boss interacts with the playfield. And this also kind of has you take a look at the way the boss's mechanics work. go ahead and throw yourself into a boss fight for the first time. You don't need to beat them right out the gate. There's no big deal. And if you die, learn stuff. Learn that, hey, you know what? This boss really likes to get up close and personal and use a lot of heavy melee attacks. So let me go with a counter ability. Or instead of a counter ability, maybe you go with a shield ability. You have one or the other. You have this, which is a channel, just like the counter, in which case it puts a shield up in front of you and it blocks things in a, I think it's like a 90-degree angle in front of you, versus your counter. Right? Your counter, you just kind of go translucent for a bit. You can block something and you immediately counter it. It shuts down the attack and you get a little bit of movement or a little bit of additional whatever it is as per the school of magic you've chosen. So I have right now, I have blood right on my character because this character, the boss we're about to fight, does have a lot of melee attacks. And I'm not going to show you the whole boss fight. We're going to jump into it and I'm going to talk through it and show you off what I mean here, because this boss also has ads. So if I go ahead and just kind of sit here and wait, okay, well, you know what? Cool. All right, great. Well, hey, I know he always has a big, huge melee attack. Well, I can use those counters. I can use those capabilities to allow me to mitigate the amount of damage he's going to do. Or, hey, I know he's going to eventually summon some ads up, so I'll cast my voids and try to take advantage of that. You really wanted to take a look at those mechanics and see, like, okay, so this is going to come out. Oh, well, I'll get feared instead and not be able to do this. But you can look at what's going on here. Like, okay, his ads are coming out. Now, you know, this is a good chance for something like a void or some other type of ability that's going to help me clear these ads and just free up some of those mechanics for me. So I'm not always trying to work over myself. And this is what I mean by the same way you approach the boss is not going to be the same way every single time. You should be dynamic and make sure you're swapping out your spells that make sense. Some bosses are not going to have these level of melee capabilities. So in those cases, hey, you know what? Maybe you switch to a pure range kit and you're using your bow now and you're not taking advantage of all the melee capabilities or all the counters, all the blocks, which you maybe still can, but it's using it in a different light. Use your spellbook as a series of tools, much like your weapon choices, to help you defeat bosses in harder difficulties, harder situations, or maybe just ones that are higher level than you. This next tip is about listening to the tells. Usually, all the bosses will vocalize before they do some sort of big telegraphed movement or big specific ability. So let's take a look over here. I'm gonna have to kill these two before we start anything. But she's gonna have a number of abilities here, and it is going to have a very set telegraph. So we'll let her just kind of shoot me. One shot, one kill. She'll do her stun. She'll do that, huh, and then shoot me with a silence. And then she'll use another one that is like, she'll be like, oh, are you ready for a roasting or something? It's not really it. Let me get her to half health. Usually a boss will have a 50% thing that they trigger. So once they hit that threshold, they'll have a new ability that they'll use. There we go, one shot, one kill. Again, we know that that's coming. We hear one shot, one kill. We know, okay, we got to get into hard cover to block that shot. Let's wait for her to get to 50%. It's roasting time, but it's something kind of like that. So they've triggered the health orbs. There you go. Wait for it to go have it again, and she'll do one that's even bigger. Isn't this an instructional video? Just watch me lose to a boss. Half my level.
One shot, one.
Again, we have that one. And a silence one. Dance for me. So that's when we know she's going to do that shot. And there's another one where she'll shoot even more. So listen to these vocal cues, or some sort of audio cue, or some sort of visual cue that tells you the character is about to do something. That could be a time when I used counter right there if I wanted to kind of piggyback on my previous one, previous message. Here, let me see if I can trigger it now. I'm probably just gonna die doing it. But either way, there it is. So that's where she does the other capability, and that's what I mean is you just kind of find those cues and trigger them as you can to make it so that you can live through these fights without always falling victim to the boss's mechanics. Now this next tip is about how not all bosses share the same faction. So you can see that boss and those undead We're fighting against each other. And that's kind of something that you can take advantage of, like especially Meredith the Bright Archer here. She and then Krieg the Undead General in this very iron mine, you can get them to kind of fight each other. If I can go ahead and pull him into her, then they'll just go ahead and throw fisticuffs and I can clean up whoever wins. This is a way to kind of curve the difficulty of any situation in which you're really fighting a boss that you're struggling with, or the boss is really kicking your ass. See, now she's fighting him. And I can kind of use this to get some breathing room and back up a little bit, try and recover, try and heal myself up, and then just kind of take the victor in this situation. There's usually either a evil, like Forces of Noctem boss, or a human boss in some way, shape, or form. And if you get the two to fight, in this instance right here, you can just kind of clean up whoever wins. And just like I said, use this when you are maybe in a new region and you can't quite gear up just yet, or you're struggling with one to kill the other. You can just go ahead and use this to weaken them, knock one out, finish off the other one, then come back and get the benefit of both. Blood type is another very inherent portion of fighting bosses, especially because it can give you really a leg up, or it can inadvertently hinder you if your blood type is too low. Let's jump ahead and go over here to blood pool. So I have a pretty good 62%, not that amazing, brute on me. But what this does is it gives me some primary attack life leech, it gives me some increased primary attack speed, and I gain 1 gear level, which is great. But if I kind of progress all the way through this, there's a 6% chance per relative health recovered to boost movement speed by 20% and damage of physical attacks by 20%. That doesn't need to be 100% to get to here. It just needs to be a very high percentage, and of course to get there in general. But then increases the magnitude up the chain. If you're going to go fight a boss with a 3% creature, you're just not going to get any benefit, or like a 4% Draculin blood, or any of the like a low percentages on your blood. It's just not going to help you out. But for example, if I were to go grab this guy who's got 99 rogue, that might really help me out if I'm fighting a specific boss for specific circumstances, or I'm using specific loadouts. Like maybe, you know what, I'm not really focusing on as much physical damage, I'm trying to use a lot of spells. Well, I probably want to go get Scholar Blood to help me out with that. Or I'm fighting a boss that is really heavy into melee. So maybe I want high percentage Warrior Blood, which will give me an innate chance to outright parry something, which just negates the shot. And that, again, I think you just need 80% plus on Warrior Blood to get that. This can really help you out. And it's really leans into the fact that you should have a good prison full of good blood percentages to flex into whatever blood helps you out the most with whatever boss you are fighting. So when it comes to these roving bosses, or really a lot of bosses in general, fight them on your own terms and in engagements that make sense for you. When a lot of these bosses have ads with them, it can be advantageous to jump in, kill the ads, reset the boss, and then come back at them. Some bosses, like this one included, will summon their own ads, so you know it's only going to help you out marginally, but still, create the engagement that makes sense here. It's an hour before the sun comes up. It doesn't make sense to start this boss fight right now. And even then, I'm on the road, so I'm going to have to deal with other patrols. So if I really wanted to fight her, I would want to bring her over into a clearing over here so I can have the advantage and I have some sort of clearing to deal with things and not have to deal with constant ads, the sun, whatever it is. Trying to avoid really crappy engagements on your own terms is really what can make the difference between an easy and a hard boss fight. When it comes to bosses, also be patient. Don't get cocky. It's very easy for you to jump into a boss and start swinging away and not just back up. Go, okay, hey, there's a big thing coming. Try and dodge these attacks, go left and right. You don't need to be up in their cookie jar the entire time. Try and find a good pace for when you can jump in. Like, hey, you know what? Right now it's not a bad idea. Let's go see if I can take advantage of this. Or, you know what? Now's the time for me to jump back and just get breath from the target. Don't be always so eager to jump in and get into the fight. And don't be afraid to just back up and watch how things unfold. And I find that the times that I lose in boss fights are always when I get the boss to like the final quarter of health and I have like 90% health. And then I just kind of get a little cocky, almost like I'm playing any of the Soulsborne games, right? In doing so, I just find that I get a little cocky and I fall into way too many mechanics and I just get completely kicked in the dick. So this is just this boss is a real good example of one where you just don't need to be up in their face the whole time. Just try to watch out for these mechanics, dodge out of the big heavy hitting ones, because he's going to freeze you, stun lock you, and punish you hard for it. You'll go from full health to no health in no time if you just take these hits like that, like I just did. So try to give yourself some room, walk around the boss, get around the encounter, and then when you see he's slowed down a little bit or he's in a place where it's a little bit more predictable to tell what's coming, then go ahead and take advantage of it. Like that's another example. See, I got hit, I got chilled, then he punished me and froze me. And if he was in a certain telegraph of a next attack, it would have really, really, really hurt. So don't let yourself kind of get overzealous or too cocky, and at the same time, give yourself plenty of room. One of my last tips here is about consumables, and this is something that I really didn't take enough advantage of in the early portions of the game. The very first one you unlock, Ferment Solve, is applicable and useful for so much of the game. You just kind of have to know how it works. This is going to heal you for 35% of your max health over 15 seconds. The healing effect is limited when in combat and breaks up upon taking damage, just like if you were to do the vampire ability to heal yourself. So you can heal yourself with these Vermin Solves, and they're really great. They're cheap, they're super effective. But this will eventually grow up into Blood Rose Brews, or you'll get access to the resistance brews like the garlic, sun, and fire resistance. These are really great ways to give yourself a little bit of an edge, especially if you're fighting a boss that does a lot of fire damage. Like even in Act 1, the guy who throws all the grenades, well, that's all fire damage. You can do this and mitigate a lot of it with the fire resistance brew. So take advantage of these consumables because they only get more insane. Especially if you're struggling with a boss and you're around the same level and you just can't get a little bit of damage on target, helping out with something like a Brew of Ferocity or in the Enchanted Brew just simply increases your physical or spell power, and that helps you. It might be the little bit of extra damage you need to sink the boss. And as you get further into the game, you'll start to get stuff that gives you the Potion of Rage, which is an even bigger increase to your physical power or your magical power, with these two. Or you take advantage of something like a Vampiric Brew, which will help increase your blood type efficiency by 5% for 60 minutes. So use the consumables because they are definitely extremely helpful, especially stuff like holy resistance potions. You can use this on bosses that do predominantly holy damage. It's not only useful whenever you jump into a place that has holy radiation. Think of these outside of simply what they allow you to do, right? Okay, the garlic resistance potion allows me to go into garlic places. Well, there's not bosses that do garlic damage. So my point remains though on the holy resistance one and the fire resistance brew still. Again, that's something, hey, you know what? I'm going to deal with a fire individual, that helps me there. Or holy resistance flask, which is the upgraded version of the holy resistance potion. Use these to your advantage. Don't sleep on them because they kind of take a little bit of effort to make. They're actually really, really inexpensive, right? Like, hey, there's a really good one. All it needs is sunflower and some grave dust. Or the vampiric brew needs bleeding heart and greater blood essence. And at the time you can do that greater blood essence, you're like shitting that stuff basically. So take advantage of these, and it's really going to change how you approach a lot of fights, and it might be that little thing that gives you an edge, and especially those fights where you're jumping into a new area and your gear level is just outmatched by 1 or 2 steps. This can give you that little bit of extra damage or that little bit of extra resistance to help push you over the edge. And to close everything out on the same note that I opened it with, swap your armor out. You know, maybe you're sticking with a specific type of armor that's actually hurting you. For example, I was using the Crimson Templar chest guard and Crimson Templar leggings with, I think, the Blood Hunter gloves and boots. Sure, I was getting an increased weapon cooldown recovery rate by 8%, and I was getting increased weapon skill each by 6%, but I was missing out on a gear level, and I was missing out on whatever the level 4 was, and I was only getting half of the benefit of whatever the armor was. But at the same time, maybe you are in the Crimson Templar armor and you're taking advantage of all these benefits. You've got all these weapon attack speed buffs. But you know what? Having the physical power increase from the Blood Hunter is better for you. Or maybe the physical crit strike chance is just a more advantageous way because it triggers into how you play. Take a look at your armor and swap it off. Another good example here would be I made a full suit of the Grim Knight chest guard armor, and it was pretty cool. Really high health, good physical power and spell power increase, but I mean, weapon skill life leech wasn't that crucial for me. I swapped over to Dreadplate, and now I love it. I get damage reduction from each portion of the armor. I increase my healing received, my shield applied, my weapon cooldown recovery is increased, and I get a gear level. So don't be afraid to jump off the armor that you've created just to get yourself to tech up. It's okay to flex into different style of armor for the different engagements. Maybe you say, hey, you know what, this next fight, I'm actually going to be using a lot more casting. So now I'm going to go use a lot of the caster gear or whatever it is. Just don't be afraid to move your items around. And if you find that you're having a lot of success with any weapon combination, spell combination, or armor combination, and it's kind of trivializing the game, I challenge you to stop doing that. To put yourself in a place where you're like, you know what? I might be only using these 2 spells the whole entire game. There's a whole plethora of spells to tap into. Go swap it off. Hey, you know what? I'm using the axes, and the axes are really kicking ass for me, but I just feel like every time I jump into an engagement, I just do nothing but kick ass. Switch over to the greatsword. It's a whole different attack pattern. It's not bad. It's just a different attack pattern. I really want to encourage you to play this game in a way that you want to play, not the way the fucking internet tells you to play. You paid your money. You play exactly how you want to play it. So hopefully this helps you out in trying to disseminate how to approach these bosses and how to kick their asses. It's an easy game if you always approach things from the min-max perspective. And maybe you want to play just exclusively PvP, then nothing in this video has any consequence to you. But playing on PvE casual or PvE brutal, there's a lot of different ways you can approach bosses, and it really comes down to changing little tiny knobs to get the success that you want out of V-Rising. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. If you have any suggestions on ways to get better at killing bosses or ways to kind of capitalize on stuff within the game, let it be known in the comment section below. But have a good one and take care.